In passing, I have one friend from the Tri-Cities. He's mentioned Hanford, but only for the purpose of his story, and there was never any follow-up until this spring when I enrolled in the class, and what I thought it was, I realized was entirely different.
I think it was a long time ago, probably elementary school, but I don't really remember much. All I ever remember equating to the word Hanford was nuclear waste, I guess.
I heard mention of Hanford in, I think it was about 2002 or 2003. I was taking a class at the Minneapolis Community College. It was a class on, it was called Women, Ecofeminism, and Development, and so we were talking about nuclear issues, and Hanford was mentioned, but I didn't really know anything about it.
Well, I first heard about Hanford after I moved here to go to school. Before then, I had never heard of Hanford or knew anything about Hanford.
I originally thought it was a power plant, which I guess there is a power plant nearby now I know, but I thought that's all it was, and that my friend had one relative or something along those lines that worked there, because even between him and it never came up as discussion, so I never knew for sure.
The Hanford Nuclear Reservation is a 586 square mile site on the Columbia River in southeastern Washington. It was built in secret during World War II to produce plutonium for the first atomic weapons. Plutonium production continued for decades as the United States nuclear arsenal grew. The nuclear waste created during this time was buried underground. After the Cold War, Hanford's mission changed from production to a massive cleanup project to prevent the leaking nuclear waste from reaching the nearby Columbia. The secrecy surrounding Hanford did not stop with the Cold War, and the public is rarely allowed access. In the spring of 2012, a small group of students from the University of Washington was permitted to visit.
My name is Omid Bagheri. I'm currently in a public policy Hanford class at the University of Washington.
My name is Stuart Simpkins. I'm a senior at UW and graduate soon in anthropology, and I'm taking the Hanford class right now.
My name is Nicole Labrie. I'm taking a class at the University of Washington, an anthropology course at Hanford.
My name is Nathan Cutshall. I'm a student at the University of Washington here in Seattle. I'm taking a class at the University of Washington on the Hanford site, and I think that for me personally, I could study something for years and years and years out of books and on the internet, but until I actually see it and experience it, then I can't really synthesize that learning. And so for me, going there and seeing Hanford and experiencing the site and being able to feel the heat and the dry air and see the river and everything like that, that really kind of made it able for me to internalize some of the things that I'm learning and sort of bring the experience full circle.
I'm born and raised in Seattle, like I said, so knowing about Hanford was pretty crucial to me because it's in my own state, so it's definitely something I should know about. And I just felt obligated to go, like I needed to learn more.
I decided to go on the Hanford tour because I had heard from a lot of people in class and from other people in the community that it was really difficult to get into Hanford, to be able to go on that tour. And actually Holly had been trying for I think at least a couple of years to get her students to be able to go out there, and so the Department of Energy finally said yes, and I didn't want to miss that opportunity that so few people get to have.
I walk out of that class every day surprised. I don't know, there's the lack of cleanup being done, the lack of, I don't know, resources for the workers to stay as healthy as possible, how contractors run everything, and then they even have some subcontractors, and it just, every day it's just like, how do people think this is a rational decision?
I would say that something that I've found most surprising would be some of their waste disposal practices that continued even into the 90s, where they would just dump chemical wastes into unlined trenches.
I guess the amount of waste that's out there and how little seems to be being done for how much money is being spent. That's really surprised me.
At first, I was certainly blown away, I suppose, by it at least appears that the history of Hanford has been forgotten. And I wouldn't say that that's absolutely true, but suppose a lot of the things in its history, in its early years, there are, of course, plenty of things that happened during those times, such as, there have been like deliberate testings to determine, the radioactive health effects on workers or this or that, or the different safety standards they had. There's all these things that I felt like, speaking even to the DOE, they acknowledged that some stuff that were done in the 40s and 50s, the health concerns were worse then, it's better now. This was something we did, or something that happened, but now we don't. I mean, certainly times have changed and they couldn't get away with all these different things that happened that you read about when World War II was going on, and then all the way up to really the 80s. So it feels like I don't see where the transition happened. It seemed like they went from this is against human rights, this, we're ignoring these rules, we're ignoring this perspective. But now it seems like on the surface everyone's open-minded and everyone is, the rhetoric has changed. I just don't see a huge distinction. I think what happened to Hanford 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago is I think it's still very much a part of it. And I think unfortunately the DOE and Department of Ecology, I think they present it like it's I think they're ignoring the history of what the Hanford was and what it is still to some people.
The tour guides, the way they were so supportive of everything that was happening, it seemed like, and if not supportive, then they definitely seemed very, good old boy, where it's everything's fine and don't worry about it, we got this, and 2015, shoot, we'll have it done by 2014. it seemed very fake.
So the thing that stood out to me probably the most from the Hanford tour was going to the waste restoration disposal facility, and it is basically like this giant landfill, and we had a tour bus, and we drove over waste that had already been buried and covered with dirt, and they parked the bus and we got off, and we were standing in front of this giant pit, and perfect timing, there's a big dump truck that comes, and they call them burritos. It's like waste that they've dug up in different sites, and they're wrapped in plastic and then they dump it into the pit. And so there's a guy working a truck dumping it, and then there's a guy standing right next to him who's working there, and all he's wearing is a t-shirt and jeans, and he doesn't have a mask on or any other protective gear, and he's just spraying the waste with water. And I found that to be shocking. And when we asked about it, why he wasn't wearing any more protective gear, the guys from the Department of Energy said that that it was safe, that he was spraying the material so that it wouldn't be able to get in. He wouldn't be able to breathe it in. He wouldn't be able to get it into his lungs. And they said that the only problem that would ever the only reason they would ever shut down that operation was if it got too windy. And at that time, we're standing at the top of the hill, and there's a wind blowing, and it's coming right towards us. And I have a hard time believing that none of that was blowing in our direction, and I just found that to be really disturbing. And then also, when we were at the tank farms, there wasn't anyone that we could see working there at that time, but they also said that they didn't need any protective gear, which I find really hard to believe. So that really concerns me. They don't really have a way of measuring that accumulation of exposure over time. So
I was pretty surprised that so much of the Hanford site is open to public highway. I mean, the public highway, I've forgotten what road it is, but that runs like, it cuts almost right through, what's designated as like the Hanford area. So that was surprising.
The plant was, well, it wasn't only my first time visiting Hanford, only time, but it was also my first time visiting Eastern Washington. And so, aside from the fact that it was just there was stretches of nothing, it was just flat and dry and arid, and then there were tiny areas that overall was categorized as a 300 area, which I suppose in my mind I anticipated would be larger. It seemed as though there wasn't much to see. I thought at first we were going to see a lot, and relatively we did, but at the same time I felt like I didn't see what I wanted to see, and I certainly don't know if I had a warped vision of what Hanford would be. So it could be as simple as the fact that we went during the day when it was hot, and I was anticipating to see workers everywhere, just a bustling amount of workers, and they do have a different work schedule in Eastern Washington and Hanford due to the weather, the heat, and they start earlier in the morning and they end. We arrived around noon, so there weren't as many. But so simple things like that throughout the day, they went against what I thought it would be, and I got to the point where I felt like I couldn't tell what was real or day-to-day, the norm, or what was being shown to us because we were there that day. So it was hard to clearly define what was real and what was not.
We were at one of the sea farms where there's single shell tanks, and they're moving all the waste from the single shell tank to the double shell tank. And before we got up to the site, the tour guide at the time was telling us that this was an extremely busy site, and there's just a lot of commotion going on, and whenever there's I think he said when there's one crane it's a busy site, when there's two cranes it's a really busy site, and there were 6 cranes at this site, so it's going to be really busy. And then we walk up to the ledge and there's nobody out there. And to me that was just so shocking. Like, I would think that as big of a deal as Hanford is, and as much waste and future problems that Hanford presents, there'd be people that are working around the clock to clean this stuff up, and that's definitely not the case.
I would say do it. Because they're talking to people that I know that are from Washington and not from Washington. The younger people that I talked to, I don't think any of them even knew what Hanford was. And some of the older folks that I talked to did know what it was. They were definitely more aware of the issues with Hanford, but it's kind of scary how my generation and younger people don't know anything about it. And it's this huge mess that we're gonna have to deal with for thousands of years. So we need more people to be aware of the issues and involved with them.
I would totally encourage you to, look it up and especially talk about it with your friends. I personally have been enjoying that aspect. I certainly have been, because amongst my circle of friends, I'm one of two that are from out of state, and I know the most about Hanford, which is only like 4 hours away.
I guess my response would be that, these wastes, this plutonium, will be around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. I mean, it's not going away. And so, when you learn about some of these things and some of the previous practices, like in the Marshall Islands, where they just, bulldozed up a bunch of dirt and put a concrete cap on it, and that was their solution for this, really contaminated area, and I don't want something like that to happen, here, where, in Washington State or in other places. And so I think, it's important for people to realize how this will affect them and how it will affect their future generations. And so I think it's important to become educated about these so that you can effectively try and enact change. And I think that's what it's all about.
Because there are so many issues there needs to be awareness about Hanford, and the more people that know about it, the more people are going to tell other people about it, and the more public awareness there's going to be. And then with public awareness comes pressuring our elected officials, and as we pressure them, hopefully things will start to change over there.
To focus on, the basics, like what the history, focusing on the history, and then and health, and incorporating real people's stories into the class, because I think, stories always help for me to understand an issue, and it's not, I think when people talk about Hanford, it's a lot about, it's really cold, it's really, doesn't show the way that it affects people's lives in a real way. And there are a lot of people that have been affected, both negatively and positively.
Knowledge is power, and so I think that the more information and the more knowledge that people have, then hopefully the more interested and angry they'll be, and they'll want to participate or try and at least do something or contribute to something.
I think you have to be very careful, because you have to be able to present a very thorough idea of Hanford, and a lot of the issues intertwine over there, and so if you just present a couple of these issues, it would be much more difficult to get a full grasp of what Hanford is all about and the issues that are over there. So the advice I would give is just to be very thorough and try to give as much of a holistic lens as possible.
I would encourage them to provide all the perspectives, only because it adds a reference for someone who doesn't know anything about it. If on that Hanford tour, if I was not taking the class and I went just to take a tour of Hanford, I would have certainly left that day thinking that everything was great. There were no problems. There was no safety concerns, both to the public and for the environment. But that's just one side, and I think it's important to get a comprehensive view on Hanford, because learning one side is not enough.